my goodness, knight d8? Whoa.
Bishop g5 was
No
mate.
way.
He has to give it. Mate! He voted mate!
Chance, rook f7. Whoa, no!
Hey, so what's your rating these days?
About 2100.
Wow, that's amazing. Puzzles. What? There are 72,084 different possible positions after 2 moves. 9 million different possible positions after 3 moves. 318 billion different possible positions after 4 moves.
I'm gonna play the London.
Seriously?
I'm sorry.
Norway, land of fjords, majestic mountains, cliffs and waterfalls. In addition to stunning geography, Norway is home to the greatest chess player who has ever lived, Magnus Carlsen. Since 2013, Norway has also hosted one of the strongest chess super tournaments in the world. And it is one for which Magnus has claimed the top prize in the last 4 years. Can anyone stop him? This time, he'll meet one of his toughest challengers ever at his home tournament, with 9 rivals all hungry to beat the best. From Carlsen's fiercest online rival today, in their first classical over-the-board battle in nearly 4 years, Hikaru Nakamura, to the young star Carlsen once handpicked as his most worthy championship opponent, Alireza Firouzja. 2 more young stars are trying to follow in his footsteps, Nodibek Abdusatorov and Gukesh Domaraju. 2 established stars have already won a super tournament in 2023, Anish Giri and Fabiano Caruana. 2 more long-time headliners seek to take their next turn atop a major tournament, Wesley So and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Finally, Carlsen's countryman and friend, Arian Tari, rounds out the field. Who will come out on top? Will Carlsen run the table yet again, or will someone else usurp the throne? This is Norway Chess.
Welcome to round 6 of Norway Chess, and it might be peaceful outside in Stavanger, but inside the arena of Norway Chess, a storm is brewing. After yesterday's unexpected result, the competition has been thrown wide open, setting the stage for some thrilling battles. I'm your host, International Master Ivanka Hauska, and as always, it's a great pleasure to be here calling the action alongside legendary Grandmaster Judith Polgar and the magnificent Grandmaster and commentator David Howell. And Judith, after yesterday's unexpected result, the competition has been blasted wide open. What can we expect from the players?
Well, we can see that more than half of the tournament is over, right? So this is going to be something very, very interesting coming up. It was very interesting to see how Fabiano drowned versus Mamedyarov, and at the same time he lost heavily. It was very painful for him, but he was such a lead ahead of the others that even now he's ahead with 1 point. So if he can recover and his mindset is right, then it means that he should be still extremely happy to be in the lead and get ready to play today.
Get ready to play today. And David, when it comes to the tournament, is now in the final stages. Does this mean the players are going to now start taking risks?
They certainly have to, especially that chasing pack who are hunting down Caruana now atop the leaderboard. It's still wide open. 9 of the players could still feasibly win the tournament, but they have to win in the classical. Armageddon won't cut the mustard right now. It's all about taking risks, and for those who pays off the risks, yeah, I think everything is still possible.
Everything is still possible, and after yesterday's results, well, there was a lot of emotion at stake, as Judith highlighted, because Fabiano Caruana did crash out to a superb Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Other results, Magnus Carlsen defeating Anish Giri in the Armageddon portion. What other results, Judith, interested you the most about yesterday?
For me, it was very interesting to see Hikaru, how he was determined to win in a classical game, because he knew that Mamedyarov is going to give a good fight for Fabiano, and whatever happens there, I know that Nakamura is following all the other games pretty heavily, but still he knew that this round can be the moment for him, I believe, and he knew that the underdog is doing pretty badly. It was his birthday, maybe he did not know about that, I don't know, but you feel it when you still want to fight for the first place. You know that the other one, your rival, has to lose, but you have to score the full point. And he knew it. He was playing a tricky opening. Well, not so tricky, but it was a slow opening. But somehow he outplayed Tari in a very, very convincing way, I must say.
Yeah. And David, any of the Armageddon results that kept you entertained?
Yeah, all of the Armageddons. That's the beauty of Norway Chess. First of all, we should mention Magnus winning yet another Armageddon. He's won all of his Armageddon so far, 4 out of the 5 rounds so far, beating Anish Giri yesterday. Great stuff from Magnus, but also Gukesh, just really confident, really just efficient, taking down Abdusattorov yesterday. For me, that was maybe the Armageddon of the round.
Yeah, and there might only have been 2 decisive results in the classical, but there were a lot of movement in the standings, because we did see Fabiano Caruana maintain his lead, but it has been shortened significantly, because Hikaru Nakamura, with that classical win, did leap up to 9.5 points out of 15, just 1 point away from Fabiano Caruana. Alireza is there, 7.5 points, but get this, from 9 to first place is only a 4.5 point difference, which means anything can and anything will happen. And talking about action, let's have a look at today's matchups, because we're in for a treat. As always, it's Norway Chess, and headlining there we can see Ariane Tari playing white against Magnus Carlsen. And Judith, which matchup are you eagerly anticipating?
I think the most I'm interested about Alireza playing against Hikaru, because Hikaru is heated up for a fight, and he knows that he's just right behind Fabiano, and they are real rivals. You can feel it in his interviews also that he would really like to catch Fabiano. So that is definitely the game of the round for me. But of course, Fabiano against Nodirbak is something I think will be extremely interesting as well.
And for you, David, I know it's very difficult to choose.
Yeah, it's difficult. All of the matchups will be exciting, of course. But, Jovanka, we're in Norway. I live in Norway now. I'm looking forward to that Norwegian derby between Ariane Tari and Magnus Carlsen. Magnus with black. He really needs to win if he has any aspirations of winning the tournament. So, big day for him.
Certainly a big day for Magnus. He will have to take some risks because he's playing black. And of course, it's Norway Chess, and Norway Chess has a very fighting format. It pushes chess to its boundaries. It's a 10-player single round robin, 120 minutes for the entire game. Sounds like a lot, it really isn't. And there is only a 10-second increment added after move 40, and in the case of a draw, this is where things get very special, because the players will then have to play an Armageddon game to break the tie. And of course, fighting chess means no draw offer before move 30. And As David and Judith have highlighted, the players do need to start winning their classical games, and there we see Alireza Firouzja and Hikaru Nakamura gearing up for their fight. Now it's very interesting because when we came into this tournament, Alireza was ranked number 2 in the world. And then this position went to Fabiano Caruana after his magnificent start. And according to the stats, that position has actually moved over to Hikaru Nakamura, who's now number 2 for the first time since 2015. So it's more than just Norway Chess. It's a matter of pride, right?
Yeah, the live ratings, they're shifting every single day, and yeah, who will be world number 2 at the end of this tournament? It's up for debate. We have all the best players here in the world, and that will be a fruity clash if Firouzja's shirt is anything to go by. But here we see Gukesh against Giri. Also, this one is going to be hard fought, of course. Both players have impressed at times in this event.
Yes, and I see Gukesh being more mature from day to day. Because yesterday, for example, he made a draw in the classical game against the other youngster, Nodirbak. But in the playoff, in the Armageddon, I was kind of surprised that, first of all, he was huge advantage out of the opening, so that was something he was very fortunate with that, but he did not take the winning opportunity. Later on, when he was much better, he was just going for perpetual check, or it was a repetition of moves just to score the point. So that's usually the case when you are very experienced, 15 years of high-class tournament behind you. But he's only 17 and he does this very professional attitude.
Very professional.
A good horse never jumps as higher than it has to. Yeah, just doing the minimum. That's enough. Impressive professional stuff.
And then they say you got to work smart. And players have started. And there we see Gukesh and Firouzja make their opening moves. And what have they played? Are we looking at d4 pawn openings? I think so when it comes to Gukesh.
Wow, and here we see that battle between world number 2 and world number 3, Firouzja and Hikaru Nakamura. And it's the Sicilian, a bit of a shock, Judith. We love to see it, of course, a fighting opening, but Hikaru nearly, kind of without fail, opens with e5 these days. He's mixing it up, showing that he wants to win as black, potentially.
Well, it is an interesting decision. But, well, maybe he became more brave after seeing the live rating list.
It's true that Hikaru tends to open with the Berlin defense. That's his favorite. But I have seen Hikaru also experiment with the Kalashnikov. He did it against Dominguez and also against Wesley So in the American Cup. Will we see the same? No, it's going to be a Rossa Limo. Alireza keeping the position closed. What are we going to see from Alireza? Is he going to capture the knight? Is he going to castle? What do we think?
I think it's also something that Nakamura probably decided that he wants to a little bit provoke Alireza, because Alireza is an incredible player with interesting ideas, unexpected ideas. So he wouldn't mind to have a very tough game, because he knows it. If he really wants to win the tournament, he has to score a classical game. So he has to win, and he wants to give a chance. Of course, he knows it, that it's going to be a huge battle, but he just doesn't want to go to the extreme solid things.
And on the subject of Hikaru, he actually, before playing this game, had a chat with our reporter Sverre. So let's hear what Hikaru had to say.
What is the most difficult, getting to the playing board or sitting at the playing board today?
I mean, obviously, I've gotten used to it over the last couple of years. There are a lot more fans of chess than there used to be, certainly whether it's like in a playing atmosphere or just in general when I'm out. But I think it's a good thing for chess in general that there are more fans. And so I enjoy all of this. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit much before the games, but overall it's a net positive. So I don't mind signing autographs or taking pictures.
Black against Firouzja today, it seems like a very important game for the leaderboard and how the table is looking right now. Is that something that concerns you, or are you just going to focus on doing what shows up on the board?
You know, I think if this was maybe a normal scoring format where it's like 1 for a win and half point for a draw, I think, you know, maybe I would think it's quite important. But I think certainly this format where you have a win in classical being worth 3, and then say you draw a game, win in Armageddon, something along these lines, being 1.5 points, I sort of feel like you just play it one game at a time and see what happens. And as I've said before, if other players just win every game in classical, there's nothing you can do about it, but you just try to focus on playing good moves, and if you play good moves, good things should happen.
Look forward to it, Hikaru. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
And there we see Hikaru giving his thoughts, surrounded by children. And we fast see chess becoming more and more popular in Norway. I know one thing, that it's kind of a New Year tradition that once the New Year celebrations are over, you go and watch the World Rapid and Blitz on TV. Every family now in Norway does this. And as a result, Magnus and Arian have a lot of supporters.
Wow, I didn't know this, that it got to this point in Norway. That's fantastic. I met these kids out there, and they were really enthusiastic, rooting for Magnus. And when I said, if it's not Magnus, they said, for Hikaru. But it's great that we see such young children already rooting for professional players. It's not only that they like the game to play just on scholastic level, but I could feel that they really follow the sport.
Yes, absolutely. And interesting enough, whenever I bump into people and I'm asked, you know, what I do, and I tell them chess player, they'll say, I've been watching Hikaru's streams. So Hikaru massively growing the game. And there we can see, are we surprised by the opening?
I think the opening progressed along very kind of traditional paths until this last couple of knight moves, Judith. Knights on the rim are dim. The players, surely they've heard that phrase before. Knight to a3. I mean, knight to h6 is maybe more traditional in this type of setup. The black knight often goes back via f7, but strange developments, you would think.
Yes, this is what I was thinking at first as well, that knight to go to h6 somehow it's more regular for black than to go knight a3 with white. But it's interesting because after knight c4, black will be playing d5, right? So that must be not an immediate plan for white. But maybe he went to a3 because he plans to go c3 and d4, and then a later stage to come to c4.
Yeah, and according to the database available to me, at least knight to a3 was the first new move, at least at this high level. Bit of a novelty there, and it didn't surprise Hikaru. Hikaru very quickly playing knight to h6. This means that most likely it's just computer suggestions, and it's up to Firouzja now to back up the fact that his knight is sitting on the edge of the board. As you mentioned there, just the black knight often gets back after a move like f6, or maybe even f5. The black knight gets into the game. Just retreats back to f7. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some fruit puns here. Just looking at Alireza's shirt, the fashion designer. I know Hikaru, I think we saw in the feature chat earlier, Hikaru loves his pineapple shirt. Maybe this is Firouzja's kind of...
special preparation, right?
Exactly. The mind games have begun. It's nearly perfect.
Perfect.
No? I think he's wearing oranges on his shirt. I can't think of any orange puns.
You can have those apple and pears, right? That's
apples and pears.
Yeah. That's a kind of English expression. Apples and pears.
Yeah, I've just been fed a pun from the producer. Orange, you glad he's wearing that shirt? Orange, you glad? Oh, that's my delivery was not great. That. It's no fig deal. I don't know. We'll get better ones a bit later in the day.
Well, I'm still impressed that they managed to come up with that on the spot.
Watch that man go. No? Anyway, back to the chess. While Alireza is deep in thought here at move 8.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see Alireza, like, he's really thinking the way that maybe he's out of book, right?
It's strange, though, to be out of book when he was the one who chose this variation as white. He's just played knight a3 himself. Either that was freestyling or it's a new move that he studied before
But also
himself.
at the same time, maybe he was expecting e5. So I'm not sure he was ready in his mindset that Nakamura will be choosing the Sicilian.
Yeah, true. I saw a great pun on the screen. He should have played 1b4 because then it's the orangutan opening.
I know. And the irony of it actually is that Alireza was playing 1b4 in the Blitz.
Yeah.
But he didn't commit the crime. And for those Edgar Allan Poe fans, they will understand. It was the orangutan that did it. You guys haven't read
Not since I was about 12 years old, Jovanka. But I loved another one. He's the juicer today. Alireza's the juicer.
Oh, very good, very good.
Shout out to Hikaru and his streams. But yeah, meanwhile, I think let's do a roundup of the other openings. This one is yet to proceed. I think once White decides what to do with the center, maybe c3, d4 most likely, then we'll come back to this and discuss the plans. Still very standard stuff so far.
And okay, taking a look at the bird's eye view, I can see a few positions that are catching my eye. Which ones are catching yours, Judith?
I was just looking for a second the Tari's game, how the developments are going on versus Magnus. And it's interesting that Magnus played Sicilian also. It seems like it's a Sicilian day. And but it was the 3 bishop b5, very solid play by Tari. And of course for Tari it would be very important not to lose today because it was a very painful loss yesterday. And somehow he should start scoring more and more points, right? So this is a kind of an understandable decision that he wants to go on the solid way. But after that he played Black played knight d7, which is more for looking for a longer game, not exchanging the bishop on d7. So I think it's going to be later on a more complicated game. Black will develop knight f6, plays a6, b5, probably bishop to develop to b7, e6 or g6. But I'm expecting an interesting middle game there.
Yeah, so it didn't kind of start as the open Sicilian, but kind of the themes will be very kind of similar, reminiscent of the open Sicilian now that White has played this move d4. And Judith, you mentioned as Black, Magnus, Hikaru, they're playing the Sicilian. They want to win, of course. How hard is it to win on demand as Black? Because for Magnus, this could be make or break time.
Well, generally, I think to win on demand, it's already very difficult. And I'm not sure exactly when you play against a lower rated or lower level player like now, Tari versus Magnus, whether it's such a big difference whether you're Black or White. But I think for Magnus, he likes challenges. And I think it might be something that it forces him to come up with some interesting, original, maybe even suspicious ideas just to create something messy position. And we have g6 on the board, which is logical that he wants to be more sharp with having a fianchetto bishop and provoking a little bit Tari. But of course, it's never easy to win on demand. And especially, I think Magnus is having more and more pressure on him, that he really feels it, that something is not working on his way. And I was kind of surprised and worried when yesterday he went to the confessional booth and he admitted that he blundered that specific move and he thought that he's much better in that position. So there was a misjudgment, I think, in the position. It's true that it was difficult, or more saying that it was dangerous for Anish. But somehow it slipped away in his hand, right? And that was not a good sign for Magnus. So I'm pretty sure that he's somehow trying to find himself to win, not only to win a game, but somehow to feel that I play well and I really do it the way that people will say, and I can say that it's the Magnus way.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you both the question, when it comes to risk-taking, do you guys have a special formula? Because I've commented alongside David, and I'm maybe going to put words into his mouth, but I've heard him say many times, you've got to keep the pieces on the board. You've got to make sure that there's a lot of tension. Do you have anything?
For example, yesterday we've seen something like this between Nakamura and Tari, because yes, that's kind of a strategy that you want to keep on the board the pieces. It's not necessarily that you are even having with White the big advantage probably you cannot have simply. But I think it's very important to keep the position. A lot of pieces, you have to make plans, decisions, pawn structures, how to do it. So this is why many people start one knight f3 when they have to win. There was this famous game between Kasparov-Karpov 87 World Championship match when Karpov was leading 12-11, and there was a must-win situation for Garry Kasparov, and he knew that there is no way that he is going to be winning just like that. He has to play a long, exhausting game. And then it's nerves and luck.
Okay, I'm going to put you both on the spot. What openings would you both play when you're in a must-win situation with the black pieces?
Well, against what?
Okay, so if I go e4, as exactly like Magnus has faced.
I think it depends against who I'm playing with, because if I know exactly what opening
Someone
reaction,
who you know who's going to be solid, lower rated than you, solid.
Well, probably I don't go into sharp lines or very concrete lines. I try to avoid and maybe even take a worse position if I really have to win.
Yeah, because often we've seen like players like play the modern, that kind of very tense, cagey game. Would you do the same? No.
I don't know, because to tell you the truth, I retired 10 years ago, nearly 9 years ago. So chess is becoming a lot different. I think it's very important somehow to understand your opponent also, what he is up to, or she.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know me, Ivanka. Like I said, just anything to keep the pieces on. Normally I react to 1e4 with e5, for example, but against certain opponents you can't really do that and hope for a game. So yeah, these days maybe the French, the Caracana, modern, something just a bit cagey, like you say, just full of tension and the questions for me to answer, but also for the opponent. And I think that's what Magnus is doing here. It's the Sicilian, of course, but he's just keeping pieces on the board. And it's kind of a hybrid now. Looks a bit like the Dragon Sicilian, potentially. Once the black knight comes out to f6, black will castle, and white has chosen a more positional line because white has castled kingside himself. And at least it's a game. It's a fresh position.
But maybe I wouldn't be surprised if Tari would have this idea to play c4, some Maroczy kind of setup with knight c3, bishop e3, and even giving up the white square bishop. Because that is something hard to crack, right?
Yeah.
It depends very much on his mood, I think.
Yeah. What do you think Ariane's mood will be? It's been a tough few days for him. 3 classical losses in a row now.
Lock the game down, simplify as much as possible. I mean, he did this last year with great success. I predict more of the same, and I think Judah is right that he will perhaps reach for that c2, c4 line.
At the same time, it's extremely difficult to make a draw if you really want to make a draw. So it's very tricky. What mindset should you be having? I think the best is, if you really want to make a draw, you have to choose what type of position you want to go to, and you're not ready to take risky decisions. If there is, whenever you have an option to go solid, you go solid, but you have to have this strategy. But the fact that you want to make a draw, let's say, it is a very dangerous strategy, that you're just always looking for equalizing, always looking for a draw. Because of course against Magnus and against strong players, just because the position is equal, it does not mean at all that it's going to be a draw. And for example, which day was it? Yesterday? No, day before when Tari played versus So, he had this Marshall gambit, and then he did not really get a bad position or worse, but he went into some very passive play, and I think he just wanted to make a draw. But then he ended up in a little bit unpleasant position, and Wesley was pressing. But okay, he did not make any serious mistake that he would drown. But this happens very often when you really want to make a draw and you don't calculate, you're just making moves generally, it's good enough, it seems good, and then you can easily make those passive decisions. It's a very, very important psychological point. And I remember, I think it was a quote from Vichy in his book Mind Master, who said there's nothing worse than needing a draw, being close to the draw, but that draw not being there. Just out of reach. Now, we've all been there in that situation.
Yeah, that's the thing in chess. If you put a draw as being like the height of Mount Everest, like you've climbed that mountain, then yeah, if you don't make it, it's just you can't get back from that. And yeah, I don't think you want to start any game, as you said, Judith, with that negative mindset, especially with white. It's so easy to go wrong. And actually, in this tournament, black has won 60% of the decisive classical games. So that shows having the white piece is not necessarily a safety net.
Yeah. But you know, it's very interesting. I think Vichy is one of the guys who is so strict. Like, he knows it exactly. If you want to make a draw, don't pretend to do something. No, you want the draw. You're not hiding it from anybody. Everybody can see it. You just go for it, exchange everything, and it's a draw. Don't think that, okay, I want to draw, but I also want to play, and I don't want it to be so transparent. No, I want to draw, I want to draw. And once, actually, I did this to Vichy, because we played incredible, interesting games. And at one point, I got somehow fed up with the fact that we made incredible, interesting games, but somehow the end of it was that Vichy wins.
Oh.
And then I thought I was playing in Dortmund, I remember. And I felt that he knows this, that tough game, complicated game, a lot of calculation, it's huge mass, everything, and at the end he wins. So he played the dragon, and then I played simplifying everything. I was just exchanging this knight d5, exchanging the queens, the bishops, everything. So he was kind of frustrated that we had a 17-move draw, and well, I was not hiding it that I want to draw. That's all. That's what. And after that, I could win against him in the next tournament. So I stopped him. But yeah, if you want to have a draw, then focus that. Don't try to trick yourself and the audience. Go for it if you have the option. But of course, this is an opening with Magnus that, of course, you cannot simplify the position and go for it completely. It's only that he's going to play solidly today.
Yeah. And talking about solid starts, should we pay a visit to Nordebek Abdustorov against Fabiano Caruana? Because there the game looks very tense. Also looks very mainstream as well. How is Fabiano doing, and what would you advise him to recover from yesterday's painful loss? Because he's still at the top of the standings. Should he hold firm with the black pieces in this game and hedge his bets in Armageddon, or just let it flow and see what comes?
I think the best thing he had to do is to fix his mindset the way that just let's look at the cross table. I see, I'm number 1. I have a 1-point lead. Perfect. So I play a normal game. So not to affect the game itself. So if he could get to that mindset that he still has a fantastic tournament so far, then everything is under control from his end.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just stem the bleeding, make sure things don't spiral out of control. It was just one bad day, but he's had several great days, Fabiano. We can definitely tell, as you mentioned, Jovanka, his change in approach, though. His last black game, he played this fiery French against Firouzja, and now against another teenager, he's kind of locked it down. It's the Berlin, a variation of the anti-Berlin, so we've only seen one set of piece trades so far, but very solid stuff. And yeah, here it's all about whether white at some point can break with a move like d4. You often need to prepare this with several moves. And meanwhile, black is very solid. Black's knight will go back eventually. Black will castle the king, most likely on the king side, but can sometimes go queen side. And it's a lot of maneuvering ahead. Judith, did you ever have this type of position in your career?
No, I was not a big fan of playing this kind of close position and giving up the bishop and exchanging on c6. So I think I wouldn't be happy to play it with either color somehow. It is a very slow maneuvering. I mean, b6. I'm not sure I completely understand why was this important, but probably it's just that black has time. He does not have to rush with a castle. He does not have to rush with knight d7. Probably he's going to be playing a5, also maybe knight a5 or something that he might be worried a little bit, but in these positions, there are so many small things happening, right? And many of the games end up in a very equalish position and they lead to a draw also. So here you have to have a lot of patience and you have to be appreciating every little sign of maybe I can get a more pleasant position kind of attitude. It's not that you have advantage, really. It's just maneuvering and you feel happy. You're maneuvering back and forth with your knight, and whether d4 will be possible. On b3, I'm not crazy to see the knight, to be honest.
I was just going to say something quite interesting. So b6 isn't a main move at all. In fact, it's only been played once before. And the main line is actually to retreat the knight to d7, and then the white knight will spring to g5, and then there will be some trades. So this is probably why Nordebeck has now gone into the tank and is thinking about Fabiano's plans. I mean, Fabiano is also, I mean, he's so famous for his prep, right? It's like his reputation precedes him. So is there that as well going on in the background?
Yeah, certainly. Fabiano is an expert on these types of positions with white as well as black, so he knows kind of what is potentially a bit annoying for the black setup, how to pose problems there, but he also knows black's best and most solid defenses. And I really like this move, as Judith says, kind of cutting out the white knight, which wanted to go to the edge of the board to attack this pawn on b7. That's gone. And yeah, I think if given the opportunity, Fabi might even keep white guessing here by making a move like queen e7 and hinting that he might even castle queenside with the black king, where he has a lot of pawn shelter. So, okay, knight g5 on the board, Jovanka. Yeah. Typical idea.
It is a typical idea. He also could have perhaps also exploded open in the center with d4, but that would have left to a completely different type of game. So, wow. I like this chat comment. Fabi doesn't play chess. Chess plays through Fabi. Great quote.
But you know, it's interesting that in these kind of positions, it's important to understand that for the top guys who are working on these kind of position, analyzing, I mean, it seems like it's just a position, nothing concrete. And maybe some people think that the players are not working out in details these lines, but actually they do. So the reason is because they have to understand the details of it. What happens, what changes in a position once you play b6 or even c5 maybe, or what happens when you play h6, or can you castle already earlier? Or for example, in the previous move, if black would have played knight d7, then knight g5 is something that definitely the black bishop would be captured. And this way, sometimes this b6 kind of moves is a waiting move, which can be useful for later use, but actually black is waiting in which direction white would like to be going. Is he going h3? Then there is a weakness. Maybe h6, g5 can happen before black castles, right? And if knight g5 now, black has the opportunity to move away with the bishop to g4 or immediately to d7 if he wants. So there are positions and situations in this slow motion game that you're just making waiting moves and you trying to get the information out of your opponent that what is your plan.
Yeah, I must admit I've played these positions more from the black side than the white kind of my entire career, and I'm just freestyling most of the time, but I have noticed that there is this trend. Top players, even if there's just all these kind of this vast array of choice, they know all the details, they know all those nuances, and I've played several games against especially the younger generation when to me it looks like, okay, every position is the same, but they're like, oh, if you had done this, I would have done this, if you would have done this, and they go so deep. And I mean, it's very impressive in these maneuvering positions where you would think the engines aren't kind of so valuable, the computer input there, but yeah, they know their stuff, they've checked it all, and I wouldn't be surprised if Fabi makes a quick decision with his bishop.
Yeah, for example, in the Berlin, I remember when Kramnik started to play it and he brought into fashion when he won the match against Kasparov. And if our audience also knows this queen exchange where the king is on d8, and then there is a strategical thing. Are you playing rook d1 check, pushing back the king to a8, or you're allowing the black king to go to b7? In principle, you can wait this way or that way, but still you have to make a decision how you want to have the game going in the next 20, 30, 40 moves, because it just goes to a completely different way, the game. And here also sometimes it's small things, but strategically just going to a different area.
And let's check out maybe some of the other action. In the meantime, this game is going to enter a slower phase. I'm expecting the black bishop to move. Black wants to keep the bishop pair. no reason to kind of allow that trade when you have a slightly worse pawn structure. So where next to go? I'm looking at some exciting games.
Can I direct you to the Gukesh Anish Giri game? Just from pure selfishness, because I actually play this opening myself with white, and I want to see what happened, and I want to see whether Gukesh has gotten a good position.
I was also picking on that game.
Yeah, and this game has progressed far quicker than a lot of the other games, which are still within the first 10 moves. This one's out at move 17 already. Look at the white king. It's actually castled queenside. Of course, actually, when I first started playing chess, I thought the king castled queenside onto b1, and the rook came over to c1. But it took me a while to realize you go to c1 and then step over to b1. It takes an extra move, and then the rook has actually moved over to c1 as well. So white's burnt a lot of time there. But should we do an action replay?
Yes.
From the start.
And it's interesting that Anish was spending less than 5 minutes so far.
Yeah, less than 5 minutes and 17 moves on the board. d4, d5. Jovanka, you mentioned you play this opening. It starts out as the Slav, and the variation where white just blocks things just slowly with e3 and bishop f5. And of course, we see this is one of the most trendy variations in chess right now. The white knight hunts down this black bishop. Actually, if white doesn't play this, then black pretty much has a London system with colours reversed, and therefore a very healthy, solid position. So white hunts down the bishop pair, and eventually this bishop drops back. We see queen to b3, hitting the b7 pawn. This is the one downside behind developing black's c8 bishop early. And after queen c7, the move castle queenside. If this bishop was allowed to live, then this would be a precarious decision with the king on c1. But of course, this bishop on g6 will not survive too much longer. It will get traded off after a trade of pawns here. a6, preparing a pawn storm on the queen side. We see the trade at king b1, and the black pawns start advancing. And after d takes c5, rather than a recapture, black improves his knight first of all, and this is the current position. After rook to c1, knight to e5. Interesting last move, maybe unexpected last move, trying to jump into c4. And what do we make of this? Because you mentioned Anish has played super quickly Judith, but Gukesh has been the one burning time. He spent almost half an hour up to this point, so maybe out of book here as white.
Very interesting position, I must admit, to have the king on b1 in this position. And white has an extra pawn, and the c5 pawn somehow looks like not weak at all. But I'm pretty sure that black wants to take it back in a later stage. And yes, indeed, knight will come to c4, I believe. The question how white wants to develop with his pieces, with especially the f1 bishop. If queen f2 seems to me that it's possible to move away to open up the diagonal for the bishop. Or also I'm thinking whether can white play e4 and activate the d2 bishop?
I'm just going to give you an extra piece of general information. There was only really one game in the database, not with the knight coming to e5, but it was played just now by Gukesh with the white pieces against Arvind, and there Gukesh won. So this is clearly something that Anish has prepared.
Okay, so it was following that game, Jovanka, until this last move.
Until knight e5, yeah.
Wow, novelty by Anish Giri.
But this makes it even more interesting why Anish was thinking, not Anish, sorry, Gukesh was spending so much time until this point. Was he